We're just going to go ahead and get started. And the first question is for Rebecca Arnold. What is the top problem facing ACHD, and how would you propose to fix that problem as a commissioner?
Oh, I think growth right now is the biggest challenge that we face, and how to accommodate the growth that we're seeing in the valley. And I don't see that it's going to slow down. We work pretty closely with our land use partners to collaboratively plan for growth, and that helps. But it's a challenge when the cities change their comprehensive plans in an area where we were expecting, maybe 1 or 2 houses per acre, and it goes up suddenly a 250 unit apartment goes in. So that presents a challenge. Funding to try to accommodate the growth is also a challenge. We recently completed an update to our capital improvements plan and increase the impact fees that we charge by 9%. But those are, that's just one of our funding sources. But that's the challenge right now is trying to accommodate the growth and trying to accommodate the changes in where the growth is going and where the density is. How do I address that? You have to be continuously talking with the land use partners and following what they're doing and making adjustments to the plan as best you can as changes occur.
Okay. And Alexis, the same question for you. What's the biggest challenge facing ACHD, and how would you address it as a commissioner?
That's a really good question. Thank you all for having me. It's great to be here. I would also agree that growth is definitely the big challenge. However, there aren't really good relationships with the cities and the county with ACHD currently. And there hasn't been a lot of coordination and working together to make sure that we have a cohesive plan and how we're going to prioritize how we grow and make sure that we're growing sustainably. And protecting all the things that we hold dear about what's so beautiful about Ada County. So I think growth is definitely a problem, and there's been a lack of coordination. And so I think I'm really excited to see the work that Ada County has done on the coordination plan for good growth. And I'm really curious to see what their fiscal analysis is going to be, because I think that needs to be a baseline and a huge part of how ACHD decides to basically pay for our growth that we're experiencing and making sure that it's going, where it needs to, and we're making growth pay for itself as much as possible. So I think growth is definitely the first one, and coordinating. Secondly, it's definitely making sure that we're building a transportation system that serves all users and thinks long-term. We've been very car-centric. That's not likely going to change anytime soon, but we've fallen really behind on actually making a safe and connected bike network. We've got tons of sidewalk gaps that have been sitting there for 15 plus years. And it's really critical, if we want to not only grow responsibly, that we make it easy and safe for people to get out of their cars, whether that's kiddos walking and biking to school, making one less trip, driving to the green belt rather than just choosing to walk. So there's little things like that would make a huge difference, not only in the overall maintenance and use of our infrastructure, but our air quality, our quality of life, all of those things. So, building a transportation system that is an ecosystem of uses that uses our growth to our advantage, and making sure that we're charging development its fair share.
Okay. And Rebecca Arnold, is that a realistic view of ACHD creating this ecosystem of, not being car-centric? Is that a realistic view of how ACHD should move forward?
Well, just to address a couple of things that Ms. Pickering just said, she's pretty ill-informed. I think she's listening to rumors when she's talking about not having good relationships between the land use agencies and ACHD. That's just not true. We involve the land use agencies in all of our planning processes. We go to the agencies and seek out their approval. We meet with them in joint meetings periodically. As to the county's efforts to revive the Blueprint for Good Growth, that was something that started by ACHD in 2004 as a collaborative planning effort. And it was in place and seemed to be moving along for a number of years until the land use agencies decided they were not willing to adopt adequate facilities ordinances, and that sort of killed the plan. So I'm happy to see that the county commissioners have revived that effort, and we're certainly participating to see how that goes. As to being car-centric, well, it's not ACHD's choice whether to be car-centric or not. It's just a reality in this region and in this valley that most of the trips are going to be by car. Do we have a plan for bicycles? Absolutely. We're working on a low-stress bike network, which was something that was important to me to implement because it seemed that everyone wanted to put bike lanes on arterial roadways, which to me is a recipe for disaster. You don't want to encourage bicyclists, especially children, on the busiest streets with the heaviest vehicle traffic. So I encourage the commissions to start looking at alternatives and encouraging cycling and providing those facilities on the lower vehicle volume streets. So the low stress bike network is something that we've been working on. It's going to take a little while to complete it. There's no doubt about that. We do have a plan in place to deal with sidewalk gaps to encourage walking. When I started on the commission, there was really no program for safe routes to school. But we now have a very robust program in that regard. We work with the school districts to identify where the best routes are for children to walk or bike to school. And we identify, okay, what needs to be done in those areas to make that possible and safe. Are there sidewalk gaps that need to be filled in? If there are, we fill those in. We work on improving bicycle facilities. We've added crossings that are much safer. And we do work with, although we're not the transit agency, there is a separate agency whose sole purpose is transit. Although we're not the transit agency, we do work cooperatively with Valley Regional Transit to accommodate their needs and plans in our transportation planning process. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, for sure. And Alexis, I want to have you respond to some of that. What more would you like to see done in terms of multi-use transportation?
Yeah, that's a great question. And thanks for the opportunity. I think, maybe at the commission, it might seem like things are going really well and those relationships are working. But as somebody that's actually worked with communities on making safe routes to school a reality and widening sidewalks and putting in bike racks and doing all those things and making sure our comprehensive plans are using good data and understand the health impacts of their land use decisions, whenever we would work together to realize some of those bigger projects, we ran into literal roadblocks with ACHD. And that was one of the big reasons why I decided to run, is because, I've been working with communities inside and outside of Ada County. I've got great relationships with Star and CUNA and Boise and Garden City. And so really, they really just want simple things. It's nothing super complicated, but it's really just filling in sidewalk gaps. It's if Boise wants a protected bike lane in a place that needs it due to traffic volumes and speed, I would be supportive of that. So really being a collaborative partner to realize those types of treatments that those users need in those communities. So I think it's just really getting down to the basics and talking to communities and say, what are the big needs? Oh, Star actually had, at the time, the highest percentage of kiddos out of every single city in Ada County. So we really prioritized working with the schools to identify those safe routes, putting in those safe bike lanes where we needed to. So it's nothing complicated. And then I think also utilizing the assets that we have. So, we've got our rail corridor. There's a lot of other really important pieces. Our canals, for example. I was on the Canals Connect Communities work group before my campaign kicked off, trying to create those lower stress bike networks. I've been on several Compass work groups. One of them was the Rail and Trail work group. The other one was the Active Transportation work group. And just really working collaboratively to say, how can we best utilize this asset that's cost effective, whether that's an easement and doing bus rapid transit. So really, again, not letting the logistics of it get in the way, but having those conversations about, okay, what's it going to take to actually make it happen?
Okay. And Rebecca Arnold, recognizing that the needs and wants of the city of Kuna may differ from the needs and wants of the city of Boise, how should ACHD Commission balance those different needs and challenges among the different cities that are in Ada County?
There are differences, and that's why we meet jointly with each of the cities separately, not all at the same time. And that's why we have an open dialogue with the elected officials in each of the cities and the county. We also meet jointly with the county. We've worked with various jurisdictions to have them tell us what they want in our Complete Streets program. So they actually design what they want their streetscapes to look like in their individual jurisdictions, and we work with them to try to incorporate those into our planning. So yes, we certainly collaborate with each of the jurisdictions in all of our planning processes. The 5-year work program, for example, we send those drafts out and seek input from each of the jurisdictions to see, okay, what do you think about what's in the plan, what's missing from the plan, what do we need to add? And we get really great feedback and input from most of the jurisdictions. We also have different plans that we have made for the different neighborhoods and communities, and they are right at the table writing those plans. So it's important to continue that collaboration. And frankly, it's puzzling to me that Ms. Pickering says she runs into roadblocks. We don't hear from her. She is not working with ACHD. She, during her campaign, has not participated in our meetings, not participated in our budget process. I've not had any contact from her on any concerns about ACHD or issues or the so-called roadblocks that she's encountered even long before the campaign. So I'm not sure who she's been talking with, but she has not been in contact with the commission.
And Alexis, if you could respond to that, what are the specific roadblocks that you're talking about? And have you been missing from the conversation with ACHD?
So basically, I don't know if you guys know this, but I was on the ACHD Pedestrian Advisory Group, and I was their chair for 2 years. And I had a previous role than what the role I have is today. And I was a policy analyst with Central District Health. And part of that work is, working with cities to increase physical activity, which oftentimes means looking at the built environment in our transportation system, because that's where we get the most impact. So I worked closely with cities inside and outside of Ada County on a variety of projects, did walkability workshops in Star and Kuna, invited all of the commissioners to come out and join us. We occasionally would have Commissioner Goldthorpe attend. At the ACHD Pedestrian Advisory Group, we would submit our recommendations to the commission and never hear anything back. We personally invited all the commission members to attend. We never saw my opponent only saw Commissioner Hansen or Commissioner Goldthorpe. And I think, again, it's more than just kind of waiting for people to seek you out. And in public health, we can't afford that. We have to actually go to the community and talk to them first and be proactive and say, what do you need from us? And how can we, meet you where you're at? And that kind of mindset doesn't really exist at ACHD. And so, once my campaign started and I decided to run, I've been really focused on actually running the campaign and talking to voters one-on-one. So I'm really proud to say that I've called and texted and talked to thousands of voters who want change. And again, really demonstrating that I'm out there to talk to them and hear what the issues are. So I haven't been super focused on attending those meetings because I've been so focused on the campaign itself. But prior to my race and me in my old role, I was in meetings constantly with maybe not commissioners consistently, but with staff members who would take those plans that they had gotten from the cities and do what they wanted with those plans. So again, there's a lot of discrepancies, and I worked really well with a lot of the staff members, but what Commissioner Arnold is saying isn't true. We've reached out multiple times, and I never saw her at any of those meetings.
How much of this is a differing issues between the city of Boise and the other cities in Ada County? It seems like the challenges might be different, where you've got existing infrastructure in the city of Boise, where there's a request from the city to maybe change use or change plans, whereas you've got Meridian and CUNA and Eagle that are approving developments that maybe are not presupposed on the 5-year work plan. How much of that plays into this? How much of a difference is there between what's going on in the city of Boise versus the other cities and unincorporated Ada County, Alexis?
So I can't speak for all the cities, but specifically thinking about when I was working with STAR, they had no projects on ACHD's 5-year integrated work plan when I first started working with them. And they weren't aware of the system in place of how to actually get a project realized. So again, by us working with them and me saying, well, let's figure it out, I called, Brooke Green and said, how can we get this together and work on this and get them actually plugged in and providing project ideas to ACHD, because historically that wasn't happening. I've talked to previous mayor of Eagle, and he'd been on several Compass board meetings with Commissioner Arnold, and never once when there was a project that was going on in Eagle did she ask, apparently to him, how's it going, what are those needs, and what do you think? So I think it's bigger than just Boise. I think it really is, a disconnect with all of the other cities, and I'm sure that there's varying degrees of that communication and ideas that's being floated up to the commission. But I think Boise, it's just been the most obvious because they have, they have much more of a passion for multimodal opportunities versus the other cities are a little bit further in behind.
Okay. And Rebecca Arnold, how would you characterize some of the challenges between the different cities? Am I reading that right? That kind of the challenges that ACHD finds itself in with the city of Boise is different from the challenges that it faces with the city of Meridian, for example?
They are different, and that's why communication and meeting with the different jurisdictions is important, because you do need to understand the different needs in the different communities. And apparently Alexis thinks that the only communication that goes on is at Compass meetings, but that's just not the case. I mean, I have conversations with the various mayors and council people and ask how things are going in their communities. It's not necessarily at a meeting, it's often one-on-one. I have regular conversations with Mayor McLean, for example. So not all communication goes on at formal meetings. And yes, there are differences between the communities, and we try to make sure we're getting their input. If we send something out and we don't hear back, then we follow up to see, okay, do you need more time? Are there questions that haven't been answered? You know, how do we mesh your vision with what our planning process is?
And so do you think that the system is working as is? Are there frustrations on both sides? And if so, how do we ameliorate them?
You know, I think it does work fairly well. Is it perfect? Of course not. You know, nothing is ever perfect, and you constantly are striving to improve it and look for ways to improve it. Are there frustrations? Occasionally, we would run into situations where we wouldn't hear back from, for example, the city of Boise on our 5-year work program and what their comments were, or sometimes the comments would come in, you know, at the 11th hour, and we might end up delaying something because we wanted time to process those comments. So, yeah, you know, sometimes there are frustrations, but I think we continually work to try to improve what we're doing. We're evaluating as we go along. Okay, how well did that go? Were there challenges? Are there ways that we can improve the process in the future?
And do you think, and Rebecca, Arnold, will stay with you, do you think that ACHD commissioners should have a bigger voice in land use decisions? Is there enough? If Meridian comes, you say, hey, we've got 2 developers that want to build 500 houses on the northwest side of the city of Meridian out in the middle of nowhere, that's nowhere in your 5-year work plan. Should ACHD come back and say, hey, you shouldn't be doing this. We can't service this area, and have a stronger voice in those land use decisions?
Frankly, no. ACHD is not a land use agency. That is not our statutory purview, and I don't think it's appropriate for the ACHD Commission to tell the land use agencies how to run their cities. Do we work with them and provide information to them? Absolutely. We do the traffic analysis or have the developers do that, and then we provide information to the city on what the impact is going to be if the city chooses to approve that land use. But that's really the only statutory role that ACHD has. We don't dictate land use. We don't dictate the visions for the various cities. We provide as much information as we can to them on what the impacts are going to be, what the challenges will be to the transportation system if they approve a particular land use, but we don't try to tell them what to do. And no, I don't think we should.
Okay. And Alexis, the same question for you. Should ACHD Commission have a stronger voice in land use decisions that are being made by the cities and the county?
Yeah, I think this is why that coordinated plan for good growth is so important, because they're, you know, connected in huge ways, and we have to be able to at least collaborate and coordinate and say, okay, where are we going to grow and how are we going to build our transportation system to support those land use decisions? So I think they're definitely hand in hand, and, you know, I don't think we don't serve our citizens when we're not transparent about the cost of growth. And, you know, when we just blindly approve road projects to support those land use decisions without actually having the funding to cover the costs of widening those roads or maintaining the infrastructure, I think that's a disservice to our community members, and then we're putting that burden on existing homeowners. So, you know, I think, again, getting ahead of it and coordinating and communicating and saying, this is the reality. If you really do want to build this development, you're going to have to wait quite a bit in order to get the road treatment that you're expecting or have sold your residents. So again, I thought that it was really valiant of especially Commissioner Goldthorpe with the Spring Rock development in Kuna and saying, hey, Kuna, this is the reality. Do you and your residents want that? And so that's the type of perspective that I would definitely bring on the commission.
Okay.
Could I ask a question of both candidate, Scott.
Yep, go for it.
On this issue, it's not an easy one. For the city council, when the Ada County Highway District comes in and there's a project and it says there's adequate capacity on the road, the issue of growth, etc., doesn't even come into it if it meets the land use plan of the city. And we can't make a decision based upon the traffic flow. Only the Ada County Highway District can make that call. Do either of you think that it is important for the Highway District, when you are talking about a change in use or a rezone, to advise at least the cities that our 5-year plan or 10-year plan is based upon your comprehensive plan? And if you change your comprehensive plan in this respect to increase the load on these roads, we cannot guarantee you that that will not create a transportation problem along these corridors. Just take that into account, since it is your long-range plan, and the cities all work on long-range plans, and they ought to pay some attention to them. Do you think that's something that the Highway District should be in a position to point out and say, you may be creating a problem?
Rebecca Arnold?
We actually do that. And that's one of the reasons that we involve the cities in our 5-year work program planning process, is so that they are informed on what the plans are. Those plans and our capital improvements plan, which is a 20-year plan, those are all based on the city's comprehensive plans. And we continually remind the cities that if you change those comprehensive plans, there is an impact on the roadway system. So we do have those conversations, and it is appropriate for us to have those conversations and provide that information to the cities. You know, we don't blindly approve anything. We go through a pretty detailed process for all of our planning, and we're transparent. You know, we provide information back and forth between the cities. We ask for information from them. So yeah, we do that. We remind them of that. And I would go back to the Blueprint for Good Growth, which was an effort started by ACHD, and it actually started in 2004, right around the time I was elected. And that plan, along with the Communities in Motion, those were both designed to be collaborative plans with all of the land use jurisdictions and ACHD and ITD. So I mean, we've been at this collaborative planning process for a long time. It's not some new thing that we should be doing. It's something we've actually been doing.
Alexis Pickering, same question for you.
I mean, I would agree. We definitely need to be communicating that, and it's, again, part of that entire system. And so if any big shift changes with new development and rezoning, we have to be able to be honest about what that shift is and be able to accommodate it if we need to.
And so this is kind of related, and Rebecca, we'll start with you on this next question, and it has to do with financing. I recall at some point, and I don't know where it stands now, but a chart showing that maintenance costs alone are going to outpace revenues. And I, you know, by 2025 or something like that, I can't remember exactly when. Where are we on that road? And is ACHD's revenues keeping pace with expenses?
Well, I think any of the transportation agencies would tell you that there's never enough funding to do everything that you want to do. Are we in reasonable shape funding wise? Better actually than you would expect. COVID really hasn't impacted us as much as maybe it has other agencies. Our impact fees, I think I have those numbers here actually. Our impact fees last year, we budgeted $20 million for impact fees. We actually collected over $26 million in impact fees. Let's see, another one, our registration fees. We collected almost $1 million more than what we had budgeted. The Highway Users Fund, we collected almost $2 million more than what we had anticipated. So our revenues have actually been better than what was projected last fall. But is there ever enough money to do everything? No. That's one of the reasons that we have increased impact fees. It's one of the reasons that we work with the legislature to identify additional sources of funding, not only for ACHD, but also for the state system. Because improvements that are made on the state system, for example, the current widening of Chinden Boulevard west of Eagle Road by the state, that actually takes some pressure off of the local system. So we do work with the legislature to try to identify additional sources of funding. Has that been perfect? No, it hasn't, but we've had some successes. House Bill 312, which was passed in 2015, provides additional funding for maintenance of our system, and it's restricted. It can only be used for maintenance. So we provide a report to the state every year on how much we received from those funds and exactly how they were spent. ITD and the state had a task force that was put together a few years ago that identified quite a few different ideas for revenue generation. And we're working with the legislature and hoping that we can get them to revive that list and actually implement some of the suggestions that the task force made.
Okay.
Can I jump in again?
Yep.
I know that the widening of the road from the village at Meridian is a significant expense, and that they pay that cost as part of the obligation that they have. But there's also a payback that they get over time for the money they put into that roadway. Is that included in the monies that are collected by the highway district and separately designated? And how does that payback system work? I'm not sure I understand it.
Rebecca Arnold?
Oh, well, that's actually an ITD roadway. So it's an ITD agreement between the developer and ITD on getting that roadway improvement in place. And yes, there is a payback. It's through sales tax revenue. So that it doesn't come through ACHD. It's actually through the through ITD and the state.
Is there anything similar to that with the Ada County Highway District?
I'm sorry?
Is there anything similar to that with the Ada County Highway District?
We do enter into cooperative development agreements with developers where, for example, they will put in an improvement. One that immediately comes to mind was Ustick and Eagle Road. The developer put in some roadway improvements that frankly wouldn't have been put in for probably a number of years if it had not been done by the developer. And those were repaid through impact fees that were collected on that particular development. So as the project developed and the impact fees were assessed, they were paid back. But it's a great deal for the taxpayers. It's a way to get the development community to front the money up front and get the improvement done sooner. So yes, there is a similar program through ACHD, but it's voluntary. It's not something that ACHD can impose on the development.
All right, and Alexis, Pickering, I want to circle back with you on the funding question and whether you think it's sustainable and whether there's anything that you would change for the long term.
Yeah, thank you. I don't think it is sustainable, to be honest, and kind of waiting to see if forecasts of funding is higher than what we expected isn't really a sustainable solution in the long term either. Historically, ACHD has not asked the full impact fee of new development, and that was just implemented a couple months ago. And so, we have a lot to catch up on, not to mention, was my internet being slow? Oh, there we go. Not to mention that impact fee is at pre-recession levels. So again, we're not really charging development the actual cost of what it takes to maintain and build the infrastructure that not only we need today, but in the future. I'm sure you all know that we're going to grow even more post-COVID, so we have to think long-term. I also, when I've been talking to folks, Garden City, all these different places, there is a lot of discrepancy between the actual costs of new development in, more dense areas. And say like Garden City, for example, and other developers that I've talked to, they would love to see more of they would be happy to pay more of an impact fee if they were able to put more of it towards things that were close to that new development. So filling in those sidewalk caps in Garden City and not having it go towards widening roads in Star or Cuna. So again, having a more honest conversation about impact fees and what's going where and how can we make it equitable and work for as many of the communities as possible, but also charging what it actually costs. So that would be my first thing.
And Rebecca Arnold, if I could ask you that question about impact fees, the collection and the spending of impact fees.
Yeah, I definitely would like to respond to that. It's unfortunate that Ms. Pickering has not been involved in our budgeting process and the capital improvements plan process, because she clearly doesn't understand how impact fees are derived. And it's not something that we recently just raised. She made that statement somewhere else that I read, that we raised them for the first time in a long time or something to that effect. The impact fees are it's a program under the impact fee statute. An agency cannot charge impact fees unless they have first put together a capital improvements plan. So you go through that process and it's updated at least every 4 years. We just completed a new update to the capital improvements plan. It's a process that takes a little over a year because we have a citizens advisory committee that is involved in that meets at least monthly. We work with the cities to see, to get their input on the capital improvements plan. So it's a very lengthy and transparent process that we go through. And it actually went on for about a year. And the impact fees are calculated based on that plan. They're not some arbitrary random number that the commission just throws out and adopts. They're actually based on the capital improvements plan, and by statute, it has to be based on that plan. The fees are raised between updates. We have them tied to inflation. So they're adjusted every year based on inflation. So they were adjusted last year. I don't have the exact percentages in front of me, but it was increased based on inflation. So yeah, it's a very involved process, and frankly, Ms. Pickering hasn't been involved in any of that. You know, she talks about the budget and where the maintenance costs are, and we had budget meetings for this year's budget starting back in January. So there are lots of opportunities to participate in that process and in the CIP process, and it just didn't happen.
Okay, I want to switch gears, and we'll start with Alexis Pickering. What role should ACHD play in promoting alternative modes of transportation, such as bicycles and buses?
I think ACHD needs to take a more forceful role in recognizing and supporting and actually prioritizing all modes of transportation and not just being so car-centric. You know, my opponent's been saying how they have a plan for a bike network, but that hasn't been realized, and that's been on the docket for years, and refused to make it a priority in the budget hearing that they just had. So there's just been, you know, a lack of, again, seeking out and actually taking heed to what those advisory committees are asking for. You know, as somebody that's been on those advisory committees, that's seen the budget, or at least it's been glanced over by all of us, and not really given us the opportunity to actually comment on it in a meaningful way. There's a lot of really important folks that have a lot of expertise, that put tons of time in making sure and providing input to those commissioners on how we should support bikeability and walkability in Ada County. And so a lot of those recommendations, especially as someone that's been on one of those committees, where we really aren't being heard, and that input isn't really translated into actual policy change. So I think we definitely need to take a stronger force on supporting walkable, bikeable streets, and supporting communities and pushing communities to think bigger if they are kind of just thinking super car centric, because again, that's not a long-term solution. And I absolutely think we need to be a better partner with mass transit and VRT. You know, there's little things that we can do. You know, ACHD obviously doesn't fund transit, but you know, the intersections itself, the timing of the intersections, you know, just making little adjustments to actually make it easier for the system to run itself. I think that is completely in its purview, and I would be a very willing partner to support VRT in the ways that ACHD legally can do that. It just behooves all of us when we're trying to be efficient and sustainable, and we're taking less cars, taking cars off the road and putting them in those users in buses or walking and biking.
All right, Rebecca Arnold, the same question. What role should ACHD play in promoting alternative modes of transportation, such as bicycles and buses?
Actually, ACHD, in every project we do, we evaluate all users. And, you know, one thing Ms. Pickering didn't mention was ADA requirements. For every project, we look at all users. We look at the needs, obviously, for vehicles. We look at pedestrian facilities and incorporate those into every project we do. We incorporate bike lanes. We look at ADA requirements and make sure that we're meeting those requirements. So we do that in every single project. And there are plenty of opportunities for citizens to provide input into those processes. Not a lot of people take advantage of it sometimes, and apparently Ms. Pickering didn't. She did serve on the pedestrian advisory group for a couple of years, and I went back, and she chaired it. I went back and looked at the minutes for all of those meetings. They met, I think, every other month, although there were some gaps in there where they didn't meet quite as frequently. There wasn't much there. And Ms. Pickering didn't come and testify to the commission or send letters to the commission or any sort of input to the commission. And there was some mention of commissioners attending those meetings. The citizens advisory groups are intended to operate independently. So we want them to have free conversation amongst themselves without, you know, pressure from having commissioners in the room or having commissioners try to direct what they're doing. So commissioners are really not supposed to inject themselves into those citizens groups. They're supposed to be able to function, without any pressure or influence from the commissioners. As far as VRT and buses, we do partner with VRT and accommodate their needs in our planning process. A good example of a collaborative plan is the State Street Transit and Traffic Operational Plan. That was a plan that it took at least a year. It was a collaborative plan between Valley Regional Transit, the City of Boise, and ACHD for State Street. And it was adopted by all three agencies. And ACHD is implementing that plan. We have also worked with VRT on a program to allow them to preempt signals, allow the drivers to preempt signals so that they can keep their buses running on time. So we are a partner with VRT.
Okay, and I have one more kind of general question. We'll start with Alexis Pickering. What differentiates you from your opponent? Why should voters select you instead of your opponent?
So I would say first and foremost, I am a collaborative partner, first and foremost. That's my day job. I have to work with communities of all different backgrounds to solve some of our most complicated issues. That's just what public health does. I'm not naive. I know that transportation is a challenging topic, and that's part of the reason why I care so much about it, because it impacts our lives in so many ways. And transportation is just more than just roads. It's connected to our air quality. It's connected to our lifelong success, our businesses, all of those things. So, I believe we need to look at transportation through that lens holistically, that it's more about than just moving cars. And, I have a proven track record of working across county and city lines. I'm endorsed by folks of all different political persuasions. In public health, we can't afford to bicker and, litigate grudges and kind of get into these fights that prevent us from solving our most urgent problems. And so I'm just really proud that I've been able to do that in public health, where we're in a crisis right now. So I'm just very grateful that I've had those track records and those relationships that I can build on once I'm on the commission. And then I would also say that, our roads aren't getting any better. We're more congested, we're less safe. And 16 years is a long time to forage these relationships and make those improvements. And I just don't think it's going to happen after 16 years of leadership at the commission. So, I'd be able to bring a fresh perspective, a collaborative mindset, and really working with those communities to say, how can we get this done, and just be a partner at the table.
Great. Rebecca Arnold, the same question for you. What differentiates you from your opponent, and why should voters select you instead of your opponent?
Well, there are pretty dramatic differences between my opponent and me, actually. Just take education and experience as the first point. As an attorney, former CPA, and an ACHD commissioner, I have more than 3 decades of experience in accounting, in business, in budget planning, implementation and oversight, infrastructure planning and construction, collaboration with elected officials and governmental agencies, transportation planning, resource and personnel management, and strategic planning for growth. So I have, decades of experience in those areas. My opponent is, she's 29 years old. She has a degree, and this is from her LinkedIn page, because that's one of the only places you can really find a lot of information. She has degrees in English writing and health sciences that were completed in 2014 and 2019. Her only real significant work experience has been with Central District Health, and not in a transportation area, not in a budget planning area. You know, ACHD is an agency that this year our budget is $135 million. We have 350 employees, and we manage assets that are worth about $3 billion. This is not a learn on the job position. You need to have some significant educational background and experience to walk into a position like this. My opponent also hasn't done her homework. You know, she's misinformed on so many issues. She hasn't participated in our meetings. She hasn't participated in the budgeting process. At a recent candidate forum, her lack of her homework, not doing her homework, really showed. She made a statement at one of the candidate forums that ACHD should take money from maintenance and put it into bike paths and transit and those sorts of things. And she actually said that maintaining our roads to a C grade should be good enough. That's frankly one of the most irresponsible statements that I've ever heard a candidate make. The transportation system that we have is worth about $3 billion. Maintaining that system is critical, because if you don't maintain the system, and we have the best roads in the Northwest, if you don't maintain the system, then you're going to pay more down the road to rebuild it. So you have to pay attention to things like maintenance. And you know, a C grade may be great for some things, but it's not appropriate for our transportation system.
We've got a couple minutes left. I want to have Alexis, if you wanted to respond to any of those allegations.
Yeah, I would say the last bit about my statement at the forum is incorrect. I said, you know, looking at our maintenance costs and the results of those, great, we are maintaining our roads really well, but how can we use potentially, you know, make some efficiencies and adjustments so that maybe we're not getting an A+ in pavement and making it like a B+. That's exactly what I said, not a C. And I also, you know, I want to highlight that I'm from Kuski, Idaho. I grew up without running water and electricity. My dad is a small business owner that I worked with fighting fires in California and Montana and Idaho. I'm no stranger to hard work, and I busted my butt to graduate from college, and I made it happen. And wasn't supported by extra people. I did it all on my own. So, you know, I really am dedicated to this state, and I am somebody that surrounds myself with great people that mentor me, that I surround myself with good data. I surround myself with diverse voices to inform me on how I should make the best decisions. So, you know, I might not have 30 years of experience, but I think that that is a value that needs to happen on the commission. We've become really stagnant, and we need to be able to have honest conversations about how can we shape and mold and plan for the growth of our communities with an open mindset.
Are there any questions from the board members? Any follow-up questions that you wanted to follow up on? All right. Well, seeing none, Alexis Pickering and Rebecca Arnold, thank you very much for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you both.
Thank you.